And these are plants developed with 60s and 70s technology that are still operating today. The future is what I want to talk about. Next slide, please. Now, economic analysis demonstrate that nuclear energy will be an important role going forward, along with other technologies. If you look at in our country, the analysis done by the Energy Information Agency, or the EPA, on the current Waxman-Markey climate bill, the cap and trade bill that's passed the House of Representatives, their assumptions in the base case are that under EIA, 96 gigawatt, virtually what we have today. We have about 100 gigawatts of nuclear in the United States. We will build another 96 gigawatts under their assumptions by 2030 in the United States. In EPA, their analysis of that bill showed that we will grow by 150% by 2050. Significant, probably more than we will build. But these are the assumptions going into or coming out of the models. Now, when they constrain that growth, when they artificially constrain the model not to allow that much to be built, the cost of carbon goes up, the cost of electricity goes up, and the GDP loss increases. So it harms our economy when we constrain it. And that gets back to this portfolio approach. If you have a full portfolio that's developed, you have a lower cost solution in the end. Next slide, please. Now, again, I've shared with you, this can't be done without an emerging recognition of its value. You're seeing that in press stories. You're seeing it in recommendations. You're seeing it in analysis. You're even seeing it by leading environmentalists who are recognizing and going online saying nuclear energy is important. Of course, James Lovelock was the founder of the Gaia Principle, who really started to look at our Earth systems. And of course, Patrick Moore was a former co-founder of Greenpeace. Both believe that nuclear energy is an important component of our low-carbon future. Next slide, please. In the U.S., our current administration, people have looked and parsed the words very carefully coming out of their mouths, but they couldn't be clearer. You can see that our Secretary of Energy, Dr. Chu, coming out of our national labs, has a very healthy respect for renewables. He's very passionate about building efficiency, but he also understands nuclear energy is important and will be important to the U.S. achieving its low-carbon goals. Next slide, please. Clearly, we have to have support from the top. President Obama couldn't make it more clear in his Prague speech this April that we must harness the power of nuclear energy on behalf of our efforts to combat climate change and to advance opportunity for all people. And this echoes really a moral imperative that the developed world has really two obligations. One is to provide capacity building to the developing world so that they can raise their standard of living and come out of poverty. In nuclear, that's a big job. That means building an entire infrastructure. You must have the regulatory, the rule of law, the regulatory process. You have to have the universities to turn out the skilled workers. You have to have a craft. You have to have manufacturing capability. That takes time. We should be supporting that, and the International Atomic Energy Agency is doing great work for capacity building for member countries that ask for that help. And I think in the post-Kyoto framework, whatever comes out of Copenhagen, that technology transfer financing mechanisms will address that. The second moral priority is that developed countries need to accelerate their deployment of low-carbon technology because the developing world will have a hard time of doing it. We have to do all we can. So I think that's an important driver as well. Next slide, please. So just quickly, a big picture of where we are around the world. Again, I mentioned we have nearly 440 nuclear power plants operating in 30 countries today. They produce about 15% of our global electricity. I did this slide in July. At that time, 47 new power plants were under construction. Today, there are 52. So things are changing rapidly. So 52 new nuclear power projects under construction around the world. In addition, 133 new plants are on the planning boards, and over 282 new plants have been proposed. Next slide. Now, all of those that I just talked about are conventional electricity machines, and those are important and will be important going forward. But we're already doing work on essentially a next generation of reactor that will provide applications even beyond electricity. In some cases, they'll provide electricity where the large systems won't work, so they'll be complementary to the large systems. In other cases, they will be distributed systems that actually can operate away from a grid. And then finally, there will be what we call process heat machines that can provide process heat for a variety of industrial applications that I'll share with you here in a minute. Some of those, as I said, we have modular and scalable small reactors. Some of these are coming out of the naval programs where we've had naval ships that have used these small reactors. Of course, you got to think about it when a nuclear submarine or a nuclear surface ship is out there. The nuclear power not only provides propulsion, it provides fresh water and breathing air for the crew and energy for their every needs. And they go for 30 years before they need to refuel. So this is incredible potential here. Be quite different. The modular scalable projects will often be used to repower existing older fossil stations where it may not be cost effective to repower a fossil station. They might be used in areas where there's small communities or small utility companies that couldn't afford the big projects. It may be that in a unique area, the cost of large power, that the advantage that comes with efficiency of scale will be overcome by modularity and the ability to transport. The many distributed applications I'll share with you for remote locations, and finally process heat. Next slide. So this is just a cartoon of two of the front runners in modular systems. Both are in the range of 50 to 125 megawatt modules that can be added together to make larger plants. Most of the older fossil plants in the United States are in the 100 to 300 megawatt range. Our new reactors are going to be 1,100, 1,600, even 1,700 megawatts. These are much too large to go into those locations. But to be able to drop in one or two modulars at 125 megawatts each might make good sense for these communities. The other thing, from economic development, the B&W, for instance, can be completely sourced from North American components. So those are all U.S. jobs or Canadian jobs, and perhaps the economies of scale will be overcome because the materials will be available close at hand and can be easily transported. Both of these are electricity machines, though, and they're designed to add small increments of electricity to an existing grid. Next slide, please. Now, there are a couple different mini reactors that are being discussed. People are very excited about them. These have the potential to offer distributed energy solutions. One, the Toshiba 4S,